We're asking the council to understand our position, and sometimes we're asking the council to take sides. Are you with the majority of New Yorkers who have no money, or are you with those few members of the administration who do have the money? That's the bottom line. And we want the caucus to be on record and say we represent the majority of New Yorkers. We are people who are 90-something% in terms of homeless, who are Black, Latino, and Asian. That's the people we speak for. The administration would speak to a few people. They're bullying us largely with their dollars because they're speaking for a few people with a lot of dollars. We're speaking for a whole lot more people with no dollars.
But in my opinion, based on everything that I know, some of your demonstrations or strategies to get your objective done, meaning Intro 48 and hearing and passing the law, you've already pissed off some people. And people that, one, in my opinion, the chair of the Housing and Building Committee, which is in this committee. And quite frankly, no bill moves in any committee unless the chair says it moves, along with obviously consulting with the Speaker's office.
They're back in the chambers, please.
That's just the way we have to in order to get our voices heard, and because we get pushed away or the doors closed in our faces. So that's why it's going to make some folks upset, and but our voices really need to be heard so that we can get these things done and that we can alleviate the shelter system and get people back into housing, because the housing is dead.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So after, let's say this goes through and we have this annual census done, what happens next?
That's step 3. What we're about today is to make sure that it's a legislative priority to get Intro 48 before the council, because we want to make sure that what is a survival priority for people who are literally freezing to death on the streets becomes a legislative priority as housing becomes necessary for people who are poor. So that's the first thing. We're addressing the caucus today because we want this to be part of your priorities to make sure this count is done, so once these spaces are identified, we can then move to bring housing online so that we don't have 37,000 people sleeping in the shelter, another 5,000 sleeping in the subways, God knows how many freezing to death in the parks.
We understand that there's a lot of concern around cost and that things are tight for the city, but it's our contention that there's a massive amount of data already being held by city agencies that could contribute towards having a citywide census of vacant property. We got the addresses of almost 1,900 vacant city-owned lots throughout the 5 boroughs. We got 3,150 vacant privately owned lots that are zoned commercial or industrial from the Office of Environmental Remediation. We got over 4,000 addresses of buildings with current partial or full vacate orders from the Department of Buildings. So between the things that New Yorkers have submitted and the information we've gotten from city agencies, we've got over 9,400 vacant buildings and lots, where we've done a district snapshot that breaks down how many vacant properties we've identified in every district. We've been in contact with Hunter College, and Hunter College recently agreed to collaborate with Picture the Homeless on a citywide count of vacant property. They said with confidence this can be done for $14,000 a year. So, while we understand that nothing is free and there's always a cost attached, we believe that the cost of implementing Intro 48 and having this sort of citywide repository of information on vacancy is actually pretty minimal. That's less than what the city spends to keep a family in shelter for 3 months.
You're saying this only costs $14,000. I don't think that you need to pass Intro 48 in order to fund the program, in order to do that independent of Intro 48. It was only $14,000. In my opinion, that's not a whole lot of money in order to fund Hunter College to do our survey. Okay. And I say that because as the chair of the Education Committee, I used some of my discretionary money to fund, what was that program, an analysis of overcrowding in schools, and where this PhD at one of the colleges sent a survey to every principal in the city of New York, and there's 1,600 schools. But I funded that program out of my discretionary money in order to see the results, about the overcrowdedness in our schools. I'm just giving you an example.
One of the things that we need to be mindful of is that if we're not negotiating with the administration on legislation, it could potentially be passed and sit on a shelf and collect dust and nothing ever be done about it. The administration has got some issues and some concerns that they have raised. And in the process, the sponsor, the committee, the speaker's office go through a back and forth. So in my mind, it's not that there's no ignoring the point that you're trying to make. It's how do we get there in the most efficient way possible, and that's a process. And I think in engaging in that process, we also have to be patient.
You know, I guess if you're homeless, every day is too long.
Yes,
Right.
yes it is.
But as far as legislation, we have legislation that's been pending for 4 years.
Yeah.
So I wanted to explain that, just in case if the members of Picture the Homeless was not aware of all of what we just described.
Excuse me, Councilman. Excuse me, Councilman, wait a minute. Sam, how long since the beginning of the writing of the bill and all the steps of changing through the language has the bill been in process?
I mean, since 2006, this bill in different formats has been on the table, and it was originally much more ambitious and talked more about taking properties away from landlords who wouldn't develop them. And you know, we, in negotiations with the council's legislative and infrastructure staff, you know, understood that there were legalities, and we took out a number of those things that were either unconstitutional or in violation of the ERSTAT law. So that's why, you know, it seems like.
4 years.
Yeah, so we are under the understanding that the council staff doesn't have any legal issues with it. It's more of a cost issue.
Okay.
Once we introduced Intro 48 and began to have some of our meetings with, you know, calling HPD, but also having meetings with Christine Quinn's staff and things like that, it just seemed like in the conversations there were a lot of excuses because, you know, we would resolve a matter and then another matter come up. And then our last conversation with her staff seemed to be kind of a definitive pushback, and that was when we began to do our direct action. We wanted to get folks' attention, saying you can't just push back and push us aside. This is legislation that's before the council. The majority of council members are co-sponsoring it. The majority of the housing committee is co-sponsoring it, and obviously it's very important to us. So we did the direct action because we felt like, you know, that some very very well-positioned members of the council were using their power to block us.
I'm going to be a little bit more blunt than William, because I think what we have to understand is that the majority of New York City, 2/3 of New York City at this point, is Black, Asian, and Latino. That's New York City population. The people who are the administration, who are delaying, deferring what we're saying, they are not representing the majority of people. That's the bottom line. They're representing their interests, which is not the Black, Latino, and Asian population.
With all due respect,
Maria Del
but
Carmen,
if you count the number of co-sponsors on that legislation, you will find that a majority of them are members of the BLAC. So we're the choir. Okay, you're preaching to the choir.
As somebody with experience preaching to the choir, sometimes choir needs to be preached to a little bit. So we really want y'all to, make this, like you said, the legislative priority.
So I'm trying to understand how it actually helps. I'm just not clear.
It really helps to, and other cities have done this, people start to say, oh, this is a great resource. We need to do something with this. And it does start moving right directly into housing. It helps the city council, the other governmental agencies say, hey, this is important. We're just letting this go to waste. We have, it's costing us, thousands of dollars to keep, a family in a shelter. Why not, use those, make some incentives, use those monies for actually permanent housing. So it really does, it's a consciousness raising thing, but it really begins changing the game.
I certainly, and I know Robert would too, will reach out to the chairs of the other caucuses and, see if you guys can reach out and let them know that you guys are going to call for an audience in whatever manner they think is
we want your help with that.
So, Madam Co-Chair.
I just said that I would do that.
Madam,
Myself and Councilmember Jackson, the other members that are here, I think we're all in agreement. We're not
Yeah.
disagreeing with you.
I
Madam
mean, we'll
Co-Chair.
reach out to the other caucus, because we're on the other caucus.
Yes.
We also have to try to reach out to the chair of the housing committee, because I think he was kind of upset at that stated meeting, because he is a supporter. So sometimes we just need to figure out ways of working. And the information you have here, the initial information, I think is really important. Even just by council district, the number of empty building, I would encourage you to send that to every council member. The information you have in their district, because I just looked at mine and it's like, that's a lot of property.
Sorry, I just want you to understand something. I live in a shelter, and Mrs. Henry, she's a former school teacher.
I'm not a former, I am.
She's a school teacher.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm a former postal worker.
Yes, ma'am.
I want you to understand the majority of the people living in the shelter system are working people and want to go back to these very communities we've been put out of.
The homeless population is coming from those districts.
And that's
They
why
grew up there.
each of the council district, they need to get that information.
You need to know that
Yeah.
these folks are coming from those communities. They grew up there, they live there, and now they're in homeless shelters.
I think that would be very important. In addition to the vacant properties, I think it would be great if you could give us sort of an idea of how many homeless there are and where they actually come from or are. We're going to try to help you move this forward. And I want to thank you all for taking your time for coming and for a very comprehensive presentation. I have agreed to advance a motion so that we at the caucus deal with this, this intro and try to help advance it. And Joanna has agreed to make sure that the council members get the district breakdown, which I think is going to open some eyes and help strengthen, our discussions.